My name is Angie, and this is a story I wasn't supposed to find.
And I'm her sister, Cindy. We grew up hearing almost nothing about our great-grandmother, just a name, Stella Smith. No photos, no grave, just a blank space in the family story.
We knew a little about her, like she was married in Springfield, Illinois in 1925. She had 2 daughters that she gave up for adoption through the Illinois Home and Aid Society. And then absolutely nothing. Nothing before 1925 and nothing after giving up her children in 1930.
We had no idea what happened to her, where she went, or even if she was alive for long after that. She was just missing, and she stayed missing for over 90 years until a DNA test cracked the case wide open.
This is Buried Threads, a podcast about family secrets, silence, reinvention, and what happens when lost stories begin to resurface.
Welcome back, listeners. If you're joining us for the first time, I highly recommend listening to our previous episodes to know the whole story of our search into the life and the story of our great grandmother, Estrella Suarez Valdez Stella Smith DeBoard. However, we will start today by giving a quick recap of what we've discovered so far.
We picked up our grandmother's search for her birth family after she passed away. After 20-some years of research, our mom took a DNA test, which led us to a match named Paul. He also had a missing family member, and together we were able to connect his missing person, Estrella Suarez, with our missing person, Stella Smith, and confirm they are the same person. We know that Estrella came to the U.S. from Spain as a child to live with a family member and widower, Manuel Suarez, and his baby girl named Luisa. He later married Rosa, and Estrella was considered part of their family as they had 4 more children together. Around age 15, Estrella married Emilio Valdez, and they had a baby girl named Mary Rose. Less than a year later, Estrella disappeared in the night, and the family seemed to have no idea what happened to her.
A short time later and a short distance away, we found the first record of Stella Smith as her marriage to Christopher DeBoard was announced in the newspaper in Springfield, Illinois. They had 2 daughters together, Florence and Marie Christine. Christopher was described as inconsistently present, and Estrella was described as abandoning her little family. The girls were handed over to an agency, maybe voluntarily, maybe not. One, Florence, would live in foster care her entire childhood and seemed to have some ongoing contact with her father, Christopher. The other, Marie Christine, was adopted at a very young age and had no contact with her birth family at all. Estrella disappeared shortly after the adoption, and Christopher's whereabouts are unknown within about a decade of the same event. Florence married and lived a steady life with her husband. They had no children. Marie Christine married, had 2 children, and her family continues to grow exponentially with each generation.
That's our journey thus far in a nutshell. Although that leaves out the details of how we discovered the story and how it played out. We've uncovered a lot of information, and we still have threads to pull as we continue our search.
As we said, the search really began after our grandmother, Marie Christine, passed away in early 2003. Our mom was helping our grandfather go through her things, found some documents showing that she had been searching for her birth family on her own, which our grandfather confirmed for her. But of course, the resources available to our grandmother weren't the same as when you began the search in around 2003. Our grandmother did hire a private investigator who was able to come up with some information, but after finding the estate where Estrella worked and lived until at least 1937, there was nothing else to find. And Angie, you took up the search in the early 2000s when genealogical sites online were really taking off, and you were able to make some headway and learn valuable information, especially about Christopher and his family. After 20-some years, we still didn't know a lot about Stella. The real game changer was when our mom took a DNA test. Now let's talk a little bit. I know we've said it before, but just in case anybody hasn't heard, let's talk just a little bit about why we wanted mom to take the DNA test and what that experience was like.
Well, after 20 years of hitting a brick wall and not getting anywhere, and particularly with regards to Stella, I suspected, and I was right, that the name wasn't correct. We didn't have a firm birth date, and there just wasn't enough information to do any research. And so, like you said, genealogy sites were kind of a thing, and they were being advertised everywhere. And so there was a sale, and I saw it and thought, this is the time.
Bought a kit,
got her to take it, and then waited for the results to come in.
Yeah. So you mentioned before that the test showed over 50 50,000 genetic matches, and meaning that she shared some amount of DNA with at least 50,000 other people, right, whose DNA was on that same database.
It's incredible.
So how did you tackle processing all that information? Like, how did you know which matches might get us closer to learning about Estrella?
Well, it was definitely a learn as I go process. I later found a group that would have helped me a lot if I'd seen that, before, but it was learn as I go. And so what I began to do, I of course focused on the matches that were larger, closer in, kind of second cousin or above. There were several hundreds of those. And so I began to work with those and then began to categorize them as maternal and paternal and build clusters. And some of that was done, you could tell by names. You could tell if you see common last names that are familiar to you that you can help do some of that. But there's a lot of names that are not familiar. They also have some tools on there that can help you figure out clusters. They'll tell you, I'm a match to you, Cindy, but then I can also look and see what matches do we share? And so here's a list of 10 people that are between us and build clusters that way.
So family members we have in common.
Yep. And so then I started flagging them and just, building these patterns. But really, it was overwhelming. It was like, it felt like I'm throwing, a dirt in the wind. Like, where is this going? But what very quickly got my attention is that my mom's ethnicity was 25% Spanish. And this was absolutely unknown to us. And it was also unknown to any of the three family members that we knew contributed to our DNA. The only one that could be then was the unknown. And so at that point, we knew that Stella had a Spanish background, which was just mind-blowing to us.
I mean, all the rest of what we thought my mom's familial makeup was very Europe, like very English,
we knew who
Scottish.
Christopher was.
Yeah,
we knew Christopher.
Yeah,
we knew Frank. We knew Grandma. And so that had to be there. That was the only anomaly or mystery in the bunch. And so, I did a really formal process of looking for the most Spanish name I could find on the DNA matches that were in the close start, and then just started writing emails out. And so the first woman that I wrote to was actually pretty far out, but she actually in relationship, but she did write to me. I noticed that they not only were Spanish, but they were particularly from the Asturias region of Spain, which is kind of a northwestern region, and which is a very unique kind of to the rest of the country of Spain. And so I began looking for anybody else that had that same genetic makeup. She was one of them. Wrote to her. Again, she didn't have any specific information relating to like our family, but she was able to talk about this migration pattern of people leaving Asturias and coming to the U.S. Her particular family actually then did be able to map out where she fit into our tree and how she was connected. Yeah. But that really got me on the track of where I was going. And then I just started writing to, again, any DNA match within a close range. Paul was in that. He wasn't on my radar at first. He didn't have a Spanish name. Yeah. And so, it wasn't flagged initially that way, but when I looked at ethnicity, he did have some ethnicity that lent itself that way. And so, anyways, sent email and, we put the story together and the rest is history. Yeah. I do remember, it's a moment that I'll never forget, a moment in time of just realizing when he said, well, I have a woman named Stella who disappeared, and I held my breath. Could this really be it? I had run so many scenarios of who Stella might be. So, hundreds, and then would always disprove them. And so I'm holding my breath until the rest of the information comes out, and then we're able to confirm we knew this. We didn't know everything, but we knew who she was. And then became the story of where did she go and, how did she get there?
Yeah. So there's a lot of DNA connections that you found, and we'll probably talk through some of those we already have. But I really want to keep talking about this use of DNA as a tool. So one of the ones that I find the most fascinating, that probably describes the process, like big picture, is how you discovered who Estrella's parents and grandparents were. Because there was confusion about this. For those of you who've heard the story, we'll map this out a little bit more later, but we know Estrella came to the U.S. from Spain. We know that she landed with Manuel Suarez, who is a DNA match, but the family, Manuel married Rosa, and they raised Estrella the rest of her childhood years. And so the whole family after that moment just believed that she was their child, or not Rosa's child, but Manuel's child from his first marriage, that she was Manuel's first daughter.
That was the family story.
That was the family story. And that's how that's how they enveloped her in the family.
Yeah.
But from DNA that that's not the case.
Something wasn't tracking up.
Right.
So first of all, the first thing is there were several people in Manuel's family. So not far away in his line, in Manuel's grandchildren and great grandchildren that had taken the DNA test. So I was able to get some real clear pictures.
Which helps. The more people in the family who take it, the better it brings it together.
The more they take it, the closer they're in.
Yeah.
And so it was clear that she was related. She's clear that she was related.
She's a blood relative
She's
of
a blood
Manuel.
relative.
Yeah.
100% clear. But what was interesting is she wasn't any closer to Manuel's children than she was to Manuel's siblings' children. And that didn't make any sense.
So cousins.
Right.
Yeah.
She should have been closer. She should have shown up as a closer match to the children of Manuel and Manuel's
Even if
children.
they had been half siblings, she still would have been closer.
The numbers weren't right. Yeah. Because numbers weren't right. And so that was my first clue. But when I mentioned this to family, this is not well received because this is not how they understood.
It's not what they knew to be
the
true.
Story. And so what I began to do, I poured records, looked many times, trying to just find a paper trail of Estrella's family. And I cannot. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. Maybe someday I'll find it, but I cannot find it. I cannot find a paper trail of her birth. I have people in Spain who are researching records there, and we cannot find it. I have,
which for the time period, that might not be unusual.
Yeah.
Like,
if I had parents' names, we'd find it a whole lot easier. Right?
Yeah. So even in the U.S. in that time period, it might be challenging to find an official birth record.
Correct.
Because it's in the early 1900s before many states even required a standard.
And they weren't digitized.
And they weren't digitized.
So they had to read through the stacks of papers.
Or they were stored in cardboard boxes for decades and fires and floods and so.
And so began looking for that. I was looking for a ship manifest. We know within a relative window when she got here, if I could see who she came over with, maybe that would give information. Nothing. The story that she gave to the adoption agency talked about her parents dying. So my initial theory was that she was an orphan. So that's why I kept looking for somebody who died and came over, and none of those things would pan out. And so I went back to AI. And said, and you can't trust AI 100%.
Right.
Because if you ask it to make any kind of judgment, it will lie through its teeth and make up things and make it sound really good.
But it can direct you.
But it can direct you.
Yeah.
But I found if I'm asking it to evaluate empirical data, the analysis are spot on. Just don't ask it to make any conjecture because it's always a bad thing.
It will lie to you.
Yes. But so I put in the walls and here's all my challenges and what to do. And so what it challenged me to do was to do a DNA mapping. Again, I had all these Spanish DNAs and map them up the tree and find grandparents in common, because all these DNA matches were going to eventually, as you go up and up and up their tree, they're going to converge.
Yeah.
And that point of conversion is going to be the most important thing. And so that's the interesting thing with DNA matches. I don't have Estrella's DNA, right? We don't have her DNA.
No, right.
And so, but you don't need it. You just need someone who's related to them. The closer the relationship, the better, right?
And we have multiple.
Yes. And so, you trace it up. So long story short, took this huge map, Ancestry as a way you can put flags on your almost like little cards that look like on the screen that are DNA matches, which makes it very visual. I'm a very visual person, right? So you can kind of watch the trickle go up, but begin to put pins on all these known DNA matches, and then you begin to see a pattern. And so what happened is, first on the paternal side, so on Manuel's side, 5 different siblings of Manuel, all DNA matches in their descendants, right? And they're all in the right percentage away and all the things, right?
All same
where you expect them to be, and they converge up to the set of grandparents. That you only need 2 to converge to be 100% sure that those are the shared grandparents. We had 5.
Oh, wow.
Then I go to the maternal side. There were much more DNA matches on the paternal than there were maternal, but nevertheless, go on the maternal side, same thing. There were 5 different lines of DNA that all go up and converge. So then I knew with 100% certainty who her grandparents are, right?
Okay.
The names of the grandparents. And so that means...
So 2 sets of grandparents.
2 sets of grandparents. So that means one had a child and one had a child, and they made Stella, right? So then I'm looking through all the records, and Of course, I'm still not. I'm trying to look at all those siblings. Some are known, some are not known. Even Manuel's family didn't really know much of his history before him. They didn't have a list of his siblings. I put that together through DNA and said, well, here's your list. Here's a list of
his history before he came to U.S. and married really Concepcion. Yeah.
I mean, he might be able to tell you those names, right? But as far as what their family records, the records they kept, what they talked about, what they shared with their family weren't there. And interestingly enough, I've met with other siblings, well, the descendants of Manuel's siblings. One relocated in the Detroit area, and their family all is there. One is in Gary, Indiana. Many conversations with them, and it was the same story. They didn't know who they didn't have family records for who their siblings were connected to. Like,
so the family came to the U.S.
but not as unit,
not as one unit. They came separately, landed in different places, and honestly, the siblings might not have even known for a long time where each other was, or maybe at all. Yeah. Right? If they came over at different times, and then over the course of time, whether they had contact or didn't have contact, the families, the descendants of them, did not know of each other.
Yeah. So, with 100% certainty, we know who the grandparents are. Martinez is on the maternal side. That's the family name. And Suarez is on the paternal side. Okay. And by the way, that also tracks with one of that's also Manuel's parents. The same. He's one of the ones that converge up there. So it also tracks.
Confirmation.
It's going to be a sibling of Manuel that is the father or the mother of Estrella. So then I look through. I don't find Estrella's name on any birth records because, again, you don't have access to all the Spanish birth records here unless they came here and were naturalized, right? Then you have those records. But lo and behold, the Suarez family had a son named Jose who married a girl from the Martinez family, right? And lo and behold, they had 10 children. And you look at their 10 children, half of them were born in Spain, the other half were born in the U.S. once they had immigrated here. But you look at them and you see all their birth years and when they were born, and there's a hole. They're all stair-step, but there's a hole right there nestled in where Estrella would fit in, right? And that would also place her as being the oldest girl, not the oldest child, but the oldest girl in the family.
And when you say there's a hole, you mean it's possible that she could fit there, like in terms of...
There's a gap. There's not another child born at the same time.
And there's enough of a gap that she could have been... Yeah.
So there's a boy, and then, Estrella, and then some other kids, whatever. So, and then I have the manifest of that entire family immigrating here. And I said this in an earlier episode, immigrating here and coming right after the known time that we know that Estrella came here, right? And coming not only to the U.S., but coming to St. Louis and living blocks away from where Rosa was living with Estrella and Luisa, right? Yeah. That's a coincidence. Speaking of coincidence, another big DNA coincidence, right? So anyways, I can't prove with 100% certainty that those children are her parents. It's possible it could be other siblings, though it seems very unlikely.
It would be a massive coincidence.
It would be a massive coincidence, but there's no proof of that, right? But I do know with 100% certainty who the grandparents are. Okay. So then comes another little interesting, very similar scenario. I'm all over Ancestry. I've already done all the DNA matches related to the family, whatever. But I happen to see someone who has a tree with family members that are very similar, but not exactly the same. And the name is Suarez. And they were in Springfield, Illinois. So I thought, well, this is kind of interesting. I want to look into this. And so I reached out and began to write to the family. And they began to write back and have lots of conversations with me. What was interesting is this. They were in Springfield in 1930. They appear on the census. Those are the records that I saw. And I'll speak about that family in just a minute. But when I traced back and went and looked, in 1920, they lived in Taylor Springs on the same street, 3 houses down from Manuel and from Rosa.
And we already said this before, but in case you didn't hear that episode, Taylor Springs is very small.
Less than 1,000 people.
Less than 1,000, couple of streets. Yeah. It's small. So, sorry, no offense to anybody in Taylor Springs, but it's a small place.
So you have... Whether there's a DNA match remains to be seen. I'll tell you why we can't find that out right now. But there's a geographical match.
Right.
During the time that they lived there, the 1920 census, that's also when Stella was living there. In fact, they would have been still living on the block when she got married to Emilio and moved next door. Not sure. I think they were already gone by the time she had the baby, but within that same period, right? They had children. They had 4 children. They had children that overlapped in ages, and one of them was the same age as Estrella, which means they all went to school together.
Right.
They all played on the same street together.
They knew each other.
Yeah. 100%. Okay. They were not from. They had been from Springfield originally. They worked at a mine. Also the
Yeah.
zinc mine. The zinc mine closed. When it closed, their family moved down to Taylor Springs. They were only there for a couple of years. That's the time they were on the same block with Estrella's family. And then they moved back. But here's also what's interesting. When they moved back, they actually built a house. So they moved into a house that they were renting while they were building another house, moved into the house, and lived there for the rest of their family life. That's how their life played out. But it was about 6-8 months when they moved. And the family knows exactly when they moved because it's tied to the date that they began building their house. Like that's a family memory that
Right.
they have very specific dates about. 6 or 8 months before Estrella left and walked away. And the place that Estrella went and the known address that we have when she had her marriage license with Christopher is within a 5-minute walk of where they lived. Now, there's lots of scenarios that could go there, right? The kid that they had that was the same age as her was a boy. So there could have been some young love going on that was chased over. It could just simply be that they were friends, and when she wanted out, there was somebody that she connected to. She may not even have talked to them, and she just may have known they went to Springfield and decided when she was leaving that Springfield is where she would end up.
Yeah.
But it's a really big coincidence.
Yeah.
So I talked to the family. They have a very detailed history. They had 4 children. One of the 4 children was the chief of police in Springfield for more than 15 or 20 years, was also part of like the Illinois State Police. I don't even remember something, but very high in law enforcement, spent, a long time doing those kind of things. The other 3 children had all kind of little different scenarios, what they did, what they were involved in. One owned a restaurant, the different things, but they had their children was very interesting because one of them never had any children. One of them by choice, like they just chose not. I think he didn't marry until he was almost 40. So they never had children. One of them, they were unable to have children. And that's the one that was the chief of police. And so they adopted a son, and he was the one actually doing a lot of the research, but he'd be glad to do DNA, but it wouldn't do us any good because he's an adopted son and not.
Yeah.
But they have done, his name is Silver, the father. He's done an incredible job before he died of documenting all of the family story. He was a hilarious guy too, but there's long narratives of all the different stories that connect to that. And then the 4th child, there is one person who could do DNA, but has been uninterested in it, though they're thinking maybe with this newfound connection that he might be interested in. He lives in New Jersey.
Yeah.
But so there's been nobody in that line to date who's ever taken DNA. So it'll be interesting to see, first of all, is there a DNA connection or not? It's possible he could be another sibling of
family member,
Manuel, or just cousin or someone in the family, whatever. Or it could just be a real big coincidence. But even if it's a big coincidence, it's not a big coincidence that they lived across the street. They would have known Estrella. And that there's proximity. It just gives some ideas of maybe how the help that she got to Springfield.
It could be, yeah. And just to go back to Manuel's family, when you talk about, who would be the two sides of Estrella's grandparents, right? You said each of those, like each side of her grandparents, paternal and maternal, each had a child who married someone from the other family.
Yes.
So you have now, I mean, we said, is that just a massive coincidence, or are those her parents? We can't prove it's her parents. But does that mean then that not all the other children are accounted for? Like, who would be the siblings of who we think are her parents?
I don't know if all the siblings are accounted for, but I have a lot of siblings. So, I mean,
Right.
it's possible.
Right. It's possible.
More.
But that also would be huge, because
Yes.
if that wasn't
They're
true.
built through DNA. That's how they're attributed.
So if that wasn't true, right, then it would mean that 2 children from each family married each other.
Which, I mean,
It's possible, but
unlikely.
unlikely. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, keeping on the topic of DNA, even though it has become somewhat controversial lately due to data breaches and concerns over corporate use of information, DNA testing has revolutionized ancestral research and genealogical mapping. It just
Because
has.
I don't need your exact DNA to prove that I'm related to you.
Correct.
I can find your DNA and I can map.
Right. I could have a relative somewhere down the line who actually.
All I need is 3. I can find a whole lot because I can
Correct.
triangulate.
Correct. So I'm always interested in looking at the larger context. We know that for posterity, if nothing else. And as genetic testing has improved over time and databases, either private or governmental, have developed, DNA has been used to solve all kinds of mysteries. First of all, it solved portions of our family mystery.
Yes.
We've talked about Paul's family and family mysteries and these greater mysteries that are still kind of out there. But our listenings might be aware, depending on our listeners, might be aware that DNA is being used to solve criminal cases
Yeah.
as well. So you might know the police were able to identify the Golden State Killer as a serial killer who was active between 1974 and 1986 using DNA.
Not just using DNA, but taking the DNA and mapping it to find out
Taking
family
the
members.
DNA and
not just matching the DNA.
No, not
match,
matching DNA.
but mapping it.
Mapping it. That's right. So I'm a true crime fan. And
Same.
I'm aware that isn't what we're here to talk about. So I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I'm going to spend a little bit of time. And like you said, basically investigators had suspects of the crimes, but they couldn't build enough of a case for any of them. So they had a DNA from the crimes, but they needed a sample to compare it to, right? So yeah, it would be great if one of the suspects had, for whatever reason, given a sample or they knew of another sample somehow, they would just compare them and they would say, does this DNA match this suspect or not? But you can't force a suspect to give up their DNA. You just can't. Unless they're already in a database for another crime or something. Mm-hmm. So that's how they... first of all, the time frame of when these crimes happened, they didn't know about DNA. But even later, they had to have a sample to test it against. So as the genealogical databases were built, investigators had the idea to take the DNA sample that they had from a crime and to run it against all the data voluntarily added by individuals doing their own personal research, right? This is called forensic genetic genealogy. Mm-hmm. Like, people do this. This sounds like a super fun job, by the way.
I'd be all in.
Yeah. But by doing so, investigators were able to connect the killer's DNA with close family members of a suspect. I don't know how many suspects they have. Let's say they had 4 suspects. When they ran the DNA through these databases, they were able to say, the person who committed these crimes, DNA, whoever that is a close family member of this suspect.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, a
person.
close family member. The suspect is a close family member
to this person,
to this DNA match. And in 2018, they charged Joseph James DeAngelo with 8 counts of first-degree murder.
Yep. I'm sure that was a relief to the families who were impacted by those deaths and the investigators who closed those cases after 30 years.
Yeah.
But it also can raise some ethical issues.
It does raise bioethical concerns. Is it okay to test DNA against the DNA of individuals who contributed it for other purposes, meaning they didn't intend to consent to give their DNA for investigation. They gave it or maybe they didn't give it at all.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe.
Because you don't need the exact person.
Because you don't need it.
You can map it.
You don't need it. That's right. And then subsequently to charge someone with a crime using those results. So family members' information was used without their consent to identify a killer. I won't get into that debate because that's not the point. But truthfully, when you submit a DNA test to these companies, you are offering that information to anyone else who is also on those databases. I mean, even if you don't give all your details, you know of a genetic match with someone whose whole profile is locked down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People, they didn't, all the ones I mapped did not give me consent to map, but they gave consent for it to be public, and I was able to get that information.
That's right. And just a word of caution, if you haven't done a DNA test for the purposes of researching your family history and you're considering it, you may find out something you didn't intend to know, or maybe something you never even suspected.
Happens more than you think. I've heard so many stories about this where people completed the DNA test to know their heritage or to build their family trees. They were looking at generations long past only to discover life-changing information about themselves, sometimes traumatizing. In our own family, not connected to Estrella's story, we discovered a family member was the son of the next door neighbor and not the father that he knew.
Yeah. Fortunately, nobody who is currently alive to really feel impacted by that. But, we don't even think that he knew. Right?
Sure he didn't.
It definitely was not part of our family lore. So one more note about using DNA to investigate decades after a crime. I found this really interesting. In May of this year, in May of 2025, a lawsuit was filed in New Jersey to test DNA from the Lindbergh baby case. I just thought this was fascinating. Mm-hmm. So in 1932, the 20-month-old son of Charles and Ann Lindbergh, the baby's name was also Charles, was kidnapped for ransom. And though the ransom was paid, the baby boy was found dead, and it is believed that he died around the time of his disappearance. So Bruno Richard Hauptmann was arrested for the kidnapping and murder in 1934, and he was executed in 1936. Obviously, with the fame of the Lindberghs, and I'm guessing many listeners have heard of the Lindbergh baby, right? With the fame of the Lindberghs, this case had all kinds of national attention, probably beyond that. And Hauptmann always claimed innocence, and people always wondered about a conspiracy of sort. I won't draw out all the things, but the question is, if the baby died around the time of his disappearance, then maybe the ransom and kidnapping was a cover-up, and then of course evidence planted, etc. So the current lawsuit that was filed in May 1st of 2025 is to test DNA from the ransom letters and other evidence to see if other people may have been involved, like organized crime figures or someone from the Lindbergh family. And of course, they would have to use these databases that we're talking about to find those connections.
Yeah. I imagine they must be thinking that these genealogical databases, unless they manage to have DNA samples specifically from other suspects, which, given it was 1930s, they probably don't have at hand. So the only way they would be able to get access to making any connections are to use these public databases.
Right, that same kind of mapping.
Yep.
So just to... If people aren't aware, originally the New Jersey State Police blocked access to the case. It was a university, wanted to do the research, and they said no. And I get it. They said they need to develop policies for accessing this kind of DNA and genetic testing, which, to be fair, they probably do. There probably aren't enough for that kind of investigation. And
right.
Somebody who's already been convicted, this is not an open case. Somebody's been convicted, they've been executed. But what I don't know is what they want to test any DNA they find on the evidence against. And that's where we assume that it's the mapping, it's the databases. But likely, they would have a genetic investigator compare any DNA found on the letters or other evidence to one of these general databases, looking for familial genetic matches that then they can trace back to those who are connected with the Lindbergh family at the time, or maybe even other suspects that they look into or whatever from the original case. So if you're interested in this kind of research and true crime, you might want to follow this story in the future. They've been given the state has been given some time, and that's the last I've heard of it so far. So,
well, it definitely could be a landmark case that continues to shape how DNA on genealogical websites like the one we used can be used for various investigations in the future.
Yeah, it's really worth paying attention to, especially if you're considering doing a DNA test for yourself. You need to weigh the pros and possible cons. You and I talked about this. Our mom did a DNA test, but none of us have. None of our generation in our family has. And I said I might be willing to, but I don't know what else we're going to find out. Like, it's a little, you just never know, right?
Yep. So
that brings in a whole other side of the family too. But okay, so let's go back to Estrella's story. There is one family story that DNA debunked regarding her, and that is specifically her parentage, which we already talked about. His family, her family, let me go back. Paul's family, Mary Rose's family, his mother, they grew up believing that Estrella was Manuel and Concepcion's daughter, along with Luisa. She would have been the oldest, and then Luisa would have come, and then of course Rosa would have come after Concepcion died. But that is unlikely to happen. But just go ahead and give everybody a reminder of the players of that in case they weren't listening before.
Sure. So Manuel married Concepcion in 1910, who gave birth to Luisa in 1911 while they lived in Kansas. In August of 1912, Concepcion died from typhoid fever. We don't have any documentation for Estrella prior to her living with Manuel, Rosa, and Luisa in Taylor Springs. Estrella was 5 years older than Luisa, so she would have been we would have expected to find her in Kansas with them or sometime before St. Louis if she had been part of their family.
Yeah.
She would have been there.
Right.
She would have shown up on all those records.
Everywhere Manuel was, she would have shown up. Yeah.
Also, he didn't marry Concepcion until after she was born.
Right.
Yeah. Also, when I looked at the DNA results, Manuel is not Estrella's father. Manuel is Estrella's uncle.
Right. Went through that. Yeah. And that probably wasn't earth shattering to the family, although it would have been surprising, but because they didn't know who Estrella was. They didn't know anything about her, but they did think that she was Manuel's child.
And it's hard when DNA changes the story that you've grown up as the story of your family.
Yeah. So probably just they assumed that. And
She was, though, in her perspective, a bit jaded in her narrative with the agency who put the girls in foster care with the Illinois Children's Home and Aid Society. She described herself more as a laborer than as a family member, and she seemed to feel as if she was there to care for others more than anything else. It doesn't mean that she was treated that way, but she definitely saw her life as a bit of a Cinderella tale. And we talked about this, but I feel like maybe she just didn't feel like she fully fit in as a member of the family, but she also was and didn't know, and just had that identity of where exactly do I fit.
It's a question of identity.
Like everybody else.
Yeah. And maybe a Cinderella story is what she searched for when she grew up, right? That dream of meeting someone who would take her away and give her that fairy tale ending.
Well, we don't have those answers, but through genetic matches, we're able to connect with family members we didn't even know about.
Yeah.
So Paul is the son of Mary Rose, Estrella's first daughter. That makes him the nephew of Marie Christine, my grandmother, and first cousin to our mom.
Yeah. So we've talked about corresponding with Paul and what you were able to learn by connecting with him, but just recap that for us.
So first, and most importantly, we were able to connect Estrella and Stella.
Yeah.
They are the same people.
Yeah.
By comparing timelines and other information, and DNA, we determined they are the same person. And this was the biggest find. Paul was also able to share some impressions based on his mother's stories and other information from family members. But even still, Estrella was a bit of a mystery to them as well. The kids were still young. The four younger kids were still young when she left.
Yeah.
Paul was able to provide Mary Rose's birth certificate, which clarified some dates, like Estrella's age when Mary Rose was born.
Right. Helps narrow down her birth date. We don't know how true it is, but it helps give us a good picture of that. And there were a couple other major finds that came from that. We always thought Estrella took on the name Stella Smith when she left her family behind, but by looking at that, we know that she went by Stella when she was married to Emilio. So that wasn't...
She'd already dropped the Spanish version of the name and was using the American version.
Right, exactly. Her name there shows as Stella Suarez.
So it could be that she went by Stella at that time, as it's this variation of Estrella.
Yeah.
Immigrants at that time often changed their names to be something more English sounding when they came to America. And so Stella would definitely be the more English sounding of Estrella. The other thing is that there are several spelling errors on the document, including her last name, Suarez, and also Emilio, both of which we have documentation for. So it could be a typo or a spelling error, which would have been common at that time. But either way, it'd be interesting if she already went by Stella. It'd be interesting to see if she already went by Stella when she was with Emilio.
Yeah. It sounds like it.
Yeah.
It's been added to the list of possible names we should be researching.
Well, there's a long list.
She has several. She has...
Spoiler alert, there's another one to come.
She has Estrella Suarez, Estrella Valdez, possibly, or Stella Valdez, Stella Suarez, Stella Smith, and Stella DeBoard. And there could be others, because we haven't been able to find documentation of Stella Smith or Stella DeBoard after 1937.
So there's something else.
Yeah.
It has to be.
Well, I don't know how, I don't know how there couldn't be.
Right.
Yeah.
The other interesting fact which came from the birth certificate is that Mary Rose was a twin. So a Reddit reader did some research and was able to find a death certificate for a stillborn baby boy who was Mary Rose's twin. It didn't come up in my research because the name was grossly misspelled, but it's a variation of a phonetic spelling of Suarez.
Yeah.
But it doesn't give us another familial thread to follow, but it does help shape Estrella's story.
Yeah, her story. Now, all of this, the point is this all came from DNA. Like, without the DNA connection, I don't know that we ever would have been able to find this.
I don't know how we would have.
Yeah. There was nothing leading us that in any direction of Suarez family at all.
It brought...
Or even an immigrant family.
Right. It brought our story to light. Mm-hmm. And it also brought their story to light. They also learned what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. We recently connected with Paul in person for the first time. We're going to talk more about that meeting. It actually needs an episode all by itself. Yeah. So we're going to do that. But and we're going to talk about our conversation. But based on your correspondence with Paul and our meeting, what difference do you think our connection has made to him and his family?
So Well, that's a better question to ask Paul.
Well, it is. But I mean, just from what you observed.
Right. So, in my conversations with him over the time, there's definitely a lot of emotions. They have there's a lot of pain and a lot of hurt that was, Paul and his sisters are the child of the child she left behind. They're the children of the child she left behind. And so there's just a lot of pain. People don't, none of us understand exactly what happened. She hadn't been talked about for a long time. In fact, I asked him, when you took this DNA test, did you ever in your wildest dreams think that you would be finding Estrella? And he said, it never even crossed my mind.
He wasn't even looking for her.
I wasn't looking for her. That's not why I took the test.
Yeah.
And so, there's been a little bit of wonder, but also I think that it was good for them, I think, to see the family resemblance. There's definitely, I don't want to get too much into this, but there was definitely some familial resemblances, and to just know a little more of the story, and kind of open up those memories again.
Yeah. I mean, just in terms of our search for information about Estrella and even her actual name, the Suarez name, right? We got so much from making that DNA connection with Paul. And then with all of Paul's family too. Photos, names. I mean, we have a photo of Manuel and Rosa and their family in the early years. Not Estrella. Estrella's not there.
But she was already married by the time.
Yeah, she was married by that time. But
and it's a beautiful photo.
It's a beautiful photo, and that's part of our story too. That we just wouldn't have had. So it's really, really great. But photos and names and family impressions and beliefs about Estrella and her story. Yeah.
So Paul had been told, and their family had been told, that she just disappeared in the night, and I think they just didn't know, right? But no one really knew what happened to her, and nothing was really talked about with it. But suddenly now we were telling him a story about a family he never heard, that Estrella hadn't just disappeared, she hadn't died, she hadn't started over. She had started over. She had a new family, and I asked them what they thought their mother would think about all this if she were here. And they said that she would just be blown away.
Yeah. Would probably still be some sadness.
I'm sure.
And same thing with our grandmother, I think. It would probably be a mix of emotions, right? But
if our grandmother could meet her sister, though.
Oh, yeah, that would have been incredible. That would be incredible. Life-changing. It would have been life-changing. Yeah. So, speaking of DNA matches, we can't leave this conversation without mentioning that we have a remaining DNA match hanging out there in California.
A very important DNA match.
We haven't been able to connect with. And I almost said we don't know where they fit, but we do know that this person, Ryan, has to be the grandchild of another child of Stella. This person has to be. The DNA match only is possible to be the grandchild
of Estrella through a fourth child unknown to us. Other than that, we know they have to exist. It cannot be Mary Rose.
Because you can't have a grandchild without having the child first.
But it cannot be Mary Rose's child. It cannot be Florence's child. It cannot be Mary Christine's child. It has to be a fourth child.
Yeah. So there's a whole other connection side for all of us to find.
And note that Louisa settled and spent her later years in California. And California's a big state, and so is LA.
Maybe Estrella went out there.
But Ryan lives in LA.
Yeah, Ryan lives in LA and is out there somewhere. If would just check their messages or log into Ancestry for one reason or another.
Yes.
Which they haven't done in quite a few years. But if they would just see that there is something wild waiting around the corner for them. It would be a game changer, not just for us, but I mean, I think about Paul and his family, and I hope we connect.
Yeah.
And Christopher's family as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be an interesting connection. It wouldn't add to their family line, but it would just be an interesting connection for them as well. So yeah, would definitely,
I remember corresponding with Paul after we confirmed this match, and we started kind of laying out how the families overlapped. And so, stories started to emerge, memories get awakened, things that you hadn't thought about for a long time, photos, names, bits and pieces. And for the first time, we were filling in blanks that had been empty for nearly a century.
Yeah, I know you alluded to the fact that was impactful for him. It was impactful for us.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure it was for him and his family as well.
I remember getting a message from one of Paul's relatives who said, "This gives me closure. We've always wondered what happened to her."
Yeah.
And I thought, so do we.
Yeah, we're looking to answer the same question.
Yes.
That's wild. But at the same time, we didn't really feel a sense of closure,
No.
right? We actually weren't looking for closure. We're looking for
Answer.
open ends. Like, we want to be able to follow. But suddenly our tree is growing in two different directions at once, past and present, right? And that mystery is still unfolding in many ways, and more yet to be if we have our way about it, right?
If Ryan opens his email.
It's a powerful reminder that not all the threads have been pulled. Yeah.
So we planned this trip to meet with Paul and to go visit Manuel and Rosa's graves for the first time. We brought our mom with us, Charlotte's granddaughter, and she stood on the land where her newly discovered family members are buried, a connection she thought she would never get.
Yeah. And there's a sense of grief in these discoveries, for me at least. It's a kind of loss of relationships or histories missed out on in a way, but also kind of cathartic, because we were standing there with beautiful people who we are connected to. And so a sense that the story, while never perfect, can still be honored.
We're going to share much more about our visit with Mom and with Paul and some other family members who traveled across the country to meet with us for the first time. We'll let you know about new discoveries and new connections.
Yeah, we'll also look at where our research stands now and what we still hope to find. We need to flesh that out a little bit. Like, we've learned a lot.
And we got new documents on Christopher's side just this week.
We got new documents on Christopher's side. We have a lot. We have a lot. So not every question has been answered, and I would say not even close. And some maybe never will be. Thanks for listening. If you're walking your own search through DNA research, silence, or your family story, you're not alone.
If you want to learn more about our story, you can read it chapter by chapter on Substack at a blog called Buried Threads. We'd love it if you subscribed or left a review. It helps other listeners to find us. And if you've uncovered something through DNA that changed your understanding of your family, we would love to hear about it. Message us on Substack or find us on Instagram at Buried Threads.
Watch for our next episode to post right here. We'll also be dropping some documents and photos with each podcast. Let us know your questions and your comments as we go.
Until next week, keep pulling the thread.